The following is a presentation of the Belly Up Sports Media Network.
Here's what's cooking on today's Sports Stove Fantasy Baseball Show. We're talking the trade impact to fantasy baseball. We've got some things to talk about: Major League Baseball news, standings, playoff races, and Kevin Wilson will join me as we talk about the ever so popular ads and drops segment. That's what's cooking on today's Sports Stove Fantasy Baseball Show.
Play ball!
Welcome in to an all-new edition of the Sports Stove Fantasy Baseball Show, presented by BellyUpFantasySports.com and Righteous Felon Jerky. I'm your host, Vince Stover. I'll be joined momentarily by the fantasy baseball senior writer for BellyUpFantasySports.com. And that's Kevin Wilson. He'll be with us here in a few minutes. We do want to say hello to our live viewers watching on the Sports Stove YouTube page and the Belly Up Fantasy Facebook page, and all those listening later via the podcast found on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Thank you for tuning in. I want to give you a quick shout out to our sponsors, BellyUpFantasySports.com, your one-stop shop for all things fantasy sports, whether it be the NFL, which is in prime time right now. Everybody getting ready for drafts and everything that's going on with camp and the reporting to camp and all that kind of stuff as well. You don't want to miss out on all the NFL stuff on BellyUpFantasySports.com. Of course, Major League Baseball articles and advice and opinions, NHL, NBA, and everything else too at BellyUpFantasySports.com. And then at Righteous Felon Jerky, your one-stop shop for the greatest tasting jerky, the greatest textured jerky. And that might seem weird to you if you're not a jerky person, but trust me, wonderful texture of the beef jerky there at Righteous Felon. Find your favorite flavor at RighteousFelon.com. Use code BELLYUP. You're going to get 15% off your purchase. Normally, Kevin is with me already, but he had to work a little bit later tonight, so he'll be with us probably in about 10 minutes or so. So we're going to get started with Adam with the Fantasy Burner segment. All right, welcome into the Fantasy Burner segment. We try to get one topic fantasy related to talk about in this segment, and we're going to talk about the trade impact of these trades that have happened so far. We won't cover all of them, but just give you a couple bits of opinions, I suppose, on this fine Sunday evening. I want to start off with my Milwaukee Brewers trading for first baseman Carlos Santana. This one makes a ton of sense, by the way, for Milwaukee. It surprised me a little bit just being that the Pirates were in the division. But I understand that baseball isn't quite like some of the other sports. It's more long-term, that kind of stuff, down the road things. So it didn't impact quite as big. But I like Carlos Santana in Milwaukee. I like him in his fantasy value. I think most of these players that have been traded have upped their fantasy value for the most part. Carlos Santana, he's in a better situation. They're going to be competing through the rest of the season. So I think that helps him out versus being in Pittsburgh. He's been batting third in the lineup so far in Milwaukee, and you like him in that top half. I don't see that changing. He might drop to fourth, but that's not a big deal. He's going to play first base mainly. He's going to be some DH as well, but there's not really any competition for him at first base. Although Abram Toro, who came up from AAA Nashville, has seen some time there in that transition period. But I think Carlos Santana is going to be fielding first base pretty regularly here through the rest of the season. Even when Rowdy Tellez comes back, unless Tellez just finds his groove, which he did not have before breaking his finger, I think Santana's got that one locked up. So I think there's a little bit of bump in Santana's fantasy value. Let's switch over to Texas. Max Scherzer comes into Texas. Jordan Montgomery comes over from St. Louis as well. Two starting pitchers that are going to help this Texas team out a whole lot. And I think they both help their fantasy value a little bit. Again, you're playing on a team who has put up a ton of runs this year. And if they put up that many runs, it just helps your bottom line as a pitcher. It's less losses going to you. Texas has a pitcher's ballpark, which is good. They're averaging, Scherzer's averaging about 7 strikeouts per game here recently. He's been having a great year with the strikeouts to innings ratio at the very least. Again, I think the atmosphere in New York was just a little bit toxic. And so I think Scherzer's going to have a little bit of a bump here just in confidence level and things like that. The mental aspect of the game, I think Scherzer's going to get some improvement. He's not having his best year, no doubt about that. But again, when you have as much run protection that they're going to have in Texas, it's going to help Scherzer out. His numbers will go up a little bit in fantasy value. Jordan Montgomery comes over from St. Louis, the worst team in the NL Central, which is hard to do in a division that's not been great this year, especially there at the bottom. But that's where they were. And Jordan Montgomery now comes over to Texas and again puts himself in a better situation where he's going to have run support, where he's going to have a ballpark that's going to just help him out a little bit as well. Montgomery's not an ace, and he will not turn into an ace in Texas. But when you're looking for fantasy value, Jordan Montgomery's value goes up. How about Lance Lynn for the Dodgers? Kevin wrote a great article on the Dodgers trades and how it affects fantasy baseball. You can find it on bellyupfantasysports.com. Encourage you to read it, so I won't give all the information that's in there. I love the trade for Lance Lynn for the Dodgers. Lynn has not had a good year in Chicago, who has. And I think this move, again, I think the mental aspect, pitching is kind of like kicking in the NFL where it's mostly mental. If they're not pitching strikes, it gets in their heads and it messes them up, right? There's a lot of physicality to it. I don't mean to take anything away from pitchers, but the mindset is everything. And I think moving to Los Angeles for Lance Lynn is going to be a positive thing for him at this point in the season. I think his fantasy value is going up greatly, actually, with his addition in for the Dodgers. How about the Angels? They went out and got Lucas Giolito from Chicago. And I lost his last 2 starts, but he's got a lot of strikeouts in those. And again, a change of scenery, I think, is a good thing overall. I don't think that Giolito's fantasy value actually changes at all, though, with this trade to the Angels. Yes, the locker room's going to be better. Yes, I think the overall mental aspect is good, at least better in the Anaheim dugout than it is in Chicago. But I think that he's having a good enough season the way it was. His ERA could definitely come down some, but I don't think his fantasy value changes at all, although I love the move for Los Angeles Angels of Anaheim there to pick him up. Jordan Hicks goes to Toronto. Toronto's looking just to shore up. Alek Manoah has not done what they expected him to do. They've got a decent rotation in Toronto. Jordan Hicks, I think, is a really good addition from St. Louis. And again, I think that move from St. Louis to a contender this year, I think does help Hicks's fantasy value slightly. I don't think it's as big of a bump as it is for Scherzer or even Montgomery or Lynn for that matter. But I think Santana and Hicks see that minimal jump in their fantasy value, which is going to help them get to that next point in their season, which hopefully will help you get to your next point in your fantasy season as well. I think, like I said, most of these trades have been positive, moved in the right direction, help players' fantasy values move in the right direction as well. Share your thoughts. Let us know what you think. That's our Fantasy Burners segment. Now it's time to move on to our Call to the Pin. Our Call to the Pin is presented by Righteous Felon Jerky. If you want the purest jerky in the game, you got to go straight to the source. And Righteous Felon has partnered with the best natural black Angus beef producers in the land to lock up the supply and guarantee the best tasting, the best textured, and the freshest beef jerky on the market. Go to righteousfelon.com. You're going to use promo code BELLYUP, and that promo code is going to help you out a lot. It's going to give you 15% off your purchase. And I'm telling you, try the Baby Blues barbecue. You will not regret it. righteousfelon.com, promo code BELLYUP for 15% off your purchase. Let's take a look at the playoff races going on currently in Major League Baseball. And a lot of these races are a lot of fun. A lot of fun things going on in this Major League Baseball season. Let's start with some of the easy ones. The NL East, the Atlanta Braves, 11.5 games up on Miami, 12 up on Philadelphia. This one has been set for quite some time. The NL East is already won. I watched this series against Milwaukee and Atlanta this week, And I said it on Twitter, and I meant it, and I'll say it again. I think Milwaukee's a top 3 team in the National League, but they're nowhere close to Atlanta. Atlanta sweeps Milwaukee. Their offensive firepower was way too much to handle. And I put Atlanta on a different level than Milwaukee. And so I'm not disappointed in the shellacking that Milwaukee took this week against Atlanta. It's what I expected. But Milwaukee's about to go on a run against subpar teams, and it gives them a chance to lock up the division. I'm curious what someone else thinks about this. And so now I'm going to bring in the one and only Kevin Wilson, the senior writer for BellyUpFantasySports.com in the fantasy baseball world. Kevin, welcome back, man. How you doing?
I'm doing much better now. I'm free from the shellacks of work and caught what you were just saying right there at the end, and I'm ready to get into some baseball.
All right, so share with me your thoughts on Milwaukee and Atlanta. The way that I put it was Atlanta's clearly the best team. Milwaukee got swept, but it's not that big of a deal because Atlanta's the best team. And so I look at it. It does not affect my thoughts on Milwaukee at all, how this weekend went with Atlanta. Should I be more concerned than I am?
I would just be a little concerned just due to the fact that Atlanta's as you said, they're on their own plateau, but you don't want to get shellacked either by them.
Sure.
And so Milwaukee, they may need to make some moves with their pitching staff.
Sure.
And a la the Rangers, as they've done. And so we were all ready to, you more than just about anyone else is ready to say, Cincinnati, go ahead and step off the stage. Your time is done. But they went into the Chavez Ravine. They beat the Dodgers 2 out of 3 this weekend. So I said last week, Cincinnati's not going away. I still believe that. I do think Milwaukee is the better team, and they should be the better team, and that'll probably come out down the stretch. So, but if Milwaukee wants to get taken seriously, they've got to get better pitching.
I agree. I think that there needs to be improvement as far as competing for a World Series. I think there has to be an improvement, but I just don't think the division. I'm just not concerned about it. I don't think Cincinnati, unless Cincinnati makes a move here. I'm not worried about them at all. But listen to this: the Brewers' next matchups, they just faced 2 series this year. They in the last series they had Cincinnati, Philadelphia, Atlanta, Cincinnati, Atlanta. Now they're going to go. They got Washington, they got Pittsburgh, they got Colorado, they got the White Sox. That's their next 4 series. That's an opportunity, needless to say, for Milwaukee to put some distance between themselves and Cincinnati.
I agree with that. They should be able to do that, and that's something we're talking about taking an opportunity. The Cleveland Guardians played the White Sox this past weekend, and they did not take advantage of it. And seeing as how Minnesota is losing every game they play right now.
Right.
You were on Cleveland, I'll give you that. And if they got to take advantage of their schedule when they're playing Kansas City and they're playing Chicago and they're playing Detroit, just like the Cleveland is.
Yeah.
Cleveland and Minnesota are in that same sorry division. Whoever takes advantage of that will win that division.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that both of those teams, we saw a lot of talk around Cleveland. Of course, they made a trade sending out Rosario, getting back Syndergaard, which shouldn't be much of a win for them, I don't think.
Yeah, you talk about getting absolutely nothing back. Syndergaard is the prime example of nothing.
I agree. I mean, I don't think that was a win for Cleveland. But I think Cleveland's got a decent roster. I think Minnesota has a decent roster too. Just to me, there's very little separation, if any, between those 2 organizations right now. And I think you said it perfect. Whoever takes advantage of the schedule is going to be the one that ends up winning. And listen, being a Brewers fan for as long as I've been, I know the pain of we should have won that game. We should have won that series. We should have won whatever. And walking away going, that's the one that you got to get. If you don't get that one, there's a reason why you're sitting at home versus still playing into late September, early October.
Absolutely. And so we got some real interesting baseball ahead of us. We got an interesting 48 hours or so ahead of us.
Yeah.
With the trade deadline. And so
I don't think there's a lot of big names left to really move. There's a potential. I think that Chicago could still ship off a guy or two that's interesting. San Diego's the one to watch. Does Snell, does Hader, does Soto get dealt? Those are probably the two organizations to watch right now as far as moving a bigger name. And we'll break it down on Wednesday. Dad and I will break it down on Wednesday's show.
Because I predicted in one of my articles that Dylan Cease was going to get traded. He's the last one standing.
Right.
And I'm really surprised that the Dodgers did not make a move and go and get him instead of Lance Lynn.
Well, it makes you wonder did they ask, right? Did they go and say, what do you want for Cease? And the price tag was high. And then they said, what do you want for Lynn? And the price tag wasn't high. They're
wasn't as high, right? And as I wrote it in my article that's on Belly Up, fantasy.com as we speak, Lance Lynn has been a disaster.
Yes.
This season. And so the Dodgers know how to straighten out pitchers. So maybe that's the magic that he needs to straighten out. And if perchance, I can't really, if he's floating around out there on the waiver wire somewhere, get him.
Yeah. So you were driving in here. What I had to say about Lynn was I think his fantasy value is boosted. I actually mentioned your article and pointed people to it as well. I didn't read your article online for everybody to hear, but I agree. I think Lance Lynn is valuable right now. I think his fantasy value goes up. I think let's talk about Texas. I like what they did. I'm not a big fan of the price tag on Max Scherzer, but if I'm Texas and I'm a Texas fan, I'm ecstatic with what we did going out and getting Max Scherzer, going out and getting Jordan Montgomery. To me, those are the moves that Baltimore needed to make. And Baltimore has just decided we're just going to sit steady. We're not going to do anything. We're going to watch this opportunity just go right past us and let someone else take advantage. I am shocked Baltimore's done nothing, but I love what Texas has done.
And so that's going to tie into when we talk about our drops here.
Okay.
Shortly. Because there are some pitchers in Texas that need to be concerned about their value going forward.
Texas and Astros are one game back, and the Astros haven't set steady. They made an acquisition earlier in the week, but I mean, to me, what Texas did is exactly what they needed to do. Am I wrong?
They needed to do that, absolutely, because since June 1st, they're 25 and 26. Mm-hmm. And as I recall, there was a certain someone who back on early weeks of June who said, hey, if you've got Texas pitchers, now is the time to sell. And I'm not exactly sure who that might have been that said that, but it has come to pass.
Yeah.
And even Navaldi is the only Texas pitcher that's worth anything fantasy-wise right now.
Which is wild because the way Haney started the year was so nice. I mean, there were some other guys that made some noise early on, but you're right.
And Dane Dunning himself was a waiver pickup at one time. But all that, and John Gray, and you said poo-poo to John Gray. But I picked him up. He gave us some interesting things. Yeah. And but they needed Texas Rangers and definitely needed to make this move. Most of their pitching, I don't think they're done unless they're going to take some failed starter and put them in the bullpen. But even if they do that, I still think they make a bullpen move before the trade deadline's over.
Yeah, they definitely could. Quickly, the Angels. I already talked about Giolito in my first segment tonight. I don't think his fantasy value really changes. I think he's a good pitcher. I think he's good for the Angels. I'm not sure his fantasy value changes at all, though.
I don't think so. Yeah, I don't think so either, because I looked, and the Angels have a very difficult schedule in the month of August. They just got playing the Blue Jays. They've got the Braves coming. They've got the Phillies coming, and they got the Mariners coming. So if they're going to make the playoffs, they're going to not be the AL Central. They're not playing those kind of teams. They're playing teams that are dead in the thick of the playoff race. And so that does not boost any value fantasy-wise, because he's not pitching against Kansas City now. Right. He's not pitching against Detroit. He's not pitching against any of that.
Yeah.
So he was on the White Sox, but
right.
But even if he's pitching against the Minnesota or Cleveland, they're not juggernaut teams by any stretch of the imagination. But now he's facing Atlanta, like I said, Phillies and Mariners, Astros coming up. So it gives him a boost, but I don't see that giving him that much of a boost.
Yeah, and I think he'll still be fine. I'm not saying drop him. I'm just saying
don't drop him. But if you have somebody who needs pitching and you can sell high on him, I would do it.
Fair point. Last thing before we get to our ads drops tonight, Marlins and Phillies. Phillies and Marlins keep flip-flopping back and forth. And the Marlins went out. They got David Robertson, which was an interesting pickup. I got him on multiple fantasy teams, and I'm scared to death. Like, he gave me a save today. I'm happy. But I'm not sure how many more of those he gets, because I still don't trust Miami.
No.
But one of the reasons I don't trust Miami is because I assume the Phillies are going to get things together. And every time I assume that, here they sit, a half game behind Miami. Are either of these teams going to even out, or is this going to be how the rest of the year goes, with Miami and Philadelphia right there battling for spot number 2 in the East and for a wild card spot ultimately in the NL?
I had thought, because we had seen Miami kind of take a step back,
a hard dive
last week. But because today they put some runs on the board, and they were down 4-0 at one time, and they came back and tied the score, took the lead, and then lost the lead, and all of a sudden now they're back in the lead. So they put runs on. If they can do that, because that's their problem, is their offense.
Yeah.
And they don't play in a ballpark that's conducive to offense in the first place. So they need to have more games like they did today. Of course, it helps if you're playing Detroit. That's certainly helpful. And so I agree with you. I think Miami's they're going to slide back. I still see it coming, and I still see, because I predicted all over the place that Philadelphia was going to grab a wild card spot. I still think that they can do that.
As it sits right now, your NL playoff picture: Dodgers, Cincinnati, and Atlanta, followed by the Giants, Marlins, and Brewers as the wild card teams. Phillies, half a game out. Diamondbacks, a game out. And watch out for those pesky little Cubs, 3.5 out of the wild card as well. Padres are 5 back. In the American League, it's got the Twins, the Orioles, and the Rangers, with the Rays, Astros, and Blue Jays as your wild card teams. The Red Sox, 2.5 out. Yankees, 3. Angels, 4. And Mariners, 4.5 out for the playoff spot. These are going to be fun races to watch. The entire
somebody's going to get bloody, having to cross over teams and climb over teams, and the Angels made these moves. I still don't. It's not going to be good enough for them to make the playoffs.
We will definitely keep an eye on it and see how it all shakes out. All right, that's our call to the pin. Let's get down to our final segment of the day, our Fantasy Focus. All right, Fantasy Focus is presented by BellyUpFantasySports.com, your one-stop shop for all things fantasy sports, NFL, NHL, NBA, and, of course, Major League Baseball. It's also the place you'd catch all of Kevin's articles, BellyUpFantasySports.com. Fantasy baseball. I want to say this. I had my worst week yet in our league, but I'm still going to win. I've only scored 231 points as of this current live recording. And thankfully, I was playing the worst team in our league, and I'm going to survive it nonetheless. I knew that was the case. I didn't make some pickups this week just because I knew I didn't need to. But I missed Merrill Kelly coming off the IL. I didn't see that until it was too late, and so I couldn't actually get the points from his start earlier this week. And my batters have had a rough week, needless to say. But that's okay. I still get the win. I'm still fine with that. We'll recap the whole league here in just a few minutes. But let's get to ads and drops because that's what the people come here for, is to hear who they should pick up, who they should get rid of. And I'm curious to see. Last week we were on the same page with a lot of guys, so I'm curious to see how we sit this week. I'll let you get started with who we should pick up this week.
All right. So who we're adding? Is that where we're starting?
Yes.
Okay. So the guy that goes right to the top of the list in on both my fantasy teams is a guy who's only 4.7% rostered.
Oh, wow.
And his name is Louis Ringafo. I'm trying to pronounce that correctly.
Ringafo or something like that.
Yeah. So this is a guy, he plays second, third, short, outfield. And it just happens over the past 2 days, he's gone 2 for 4 in both games. And so, and that was before he had hits in 4 of his last 5. And at 4.7% rostered, if you need a guy, he's available. Yeah. And that's one of the things I keep hearing when I recommend guys. Well, he's not available. Well, 4.7%, he should be, except in our league and the other league I'm in, because I went ahead and I got him. And so he's the guy that's protecting our Mr. Ohtani at present. So, and he's swinging the bat well, and he's going to get opportunities if he's hitting anywhere around even before or after Ohtani. He's going to see pitches. And so at 4.7% rostered, Louis Ringafo is a guy that can certainly help your roster.
So I was watching the Angels and Blue Jays this weekend and saw him. He stood out in the game as well. Tons of versatility. Plays all over the place for fantasy wise. He's getting, it looks like, the almost everyday stuff at second base right now, beating out Zach Neto for that job. Of course, they went out and made a trade. No, they didn't. Did they bring in an infielder?
No,
I guess they didn't. No. And so that's one thing to keep watching, right? Is those opportunities may get lost through trades. But I like that pickup, and you're right, he's available in most leagues as well. I like that one a lot. I'm going to go with a guy that's been getting picked up a lot recently, so he may not be available in your league. On ESPN, it says he's still available in 42.2% of leagues. It's first baseman for the Boston Red Sox, Tristan Casas.
Okay. Now you're pulling the rug out from under me on that one.
Okay. He's been phenomenal. I mean, his percentage owned has gone up a ton. I know it's
blown the doors off the place.
12.8%, but even 2 weeks ago, I mean, he was down in the 20 percentile range. But he's been great the last 7, 2 home runs, 5 RBIs, but he's batting .389. I mean, he's been really, really good as of late. And he's a guy that everybody was kind of watching as in draft season, and early on didn't really live up to the hype, but he's starting to find his legs, and now he's doing what he needs to do.
And yeah, he's definitely swinging the bat right now. So, like I said, that was a guy that I had on my list, and I got swooped in on. I didn't get to pick him up, but if he's available, he goes right to the top.
He deserves to be on a roster right now in fantasy baseball.
All right, so the next guy I'm going to talk about is someone that you've been beating the drum about, saying, hey, keep yourself calm about him. And he's at 50% rostered, and that's MJ Melendez.
Oh, yeah.
The guy that you've been talking about, the catcher, he didn't even know he doesn't catch, an outfielder. And if he's available, he is finally catching his footing. He has hits in 4 straight games. He's homered. He's got RBIs. He's got runs scored. And so he's a guy that I would look at if you need any kind of catching help, which who doesn't?
Right.
So I see him heating up. So if MJ Melendez is available, go ahead and get him. and so he'll be in your lineup almost every single day.
Yeah, I'm in 3 leagues. I have Melendez in all 3 leagues. And one of the leagues I drafted him, and the other 2 I picked him up off of waivers earlier in the year. And I believe I could say this, and you could correct me if I'm wrong, Kevin, but I'm a very patient guy with guys who
You
are
are way more patient than I am.
Yeah, and I commend you, Kevin, for getting rid of guys when they stink. And I'm at that point when after the All-Star break, that's when I start losing my patience. Until then, I figure I have time, unless it's a horrible season. I have time to recover, and I want to give these guys a chance. Melendez is that guy that I just held on to. I thought, no, this guy has to come around. I mean, Kansas City stinks, but this guy has to come around, and he does appear to be starting to do that. And I think he's worth having. Again, you got that versatility. If you don't like to carry 2 catchers, and
Which I don't.
You don't. If you got a decent catcher on your team, it's nice to have Melendez out there playing outfield for you. And then if your catcher sits, you can move him up to catcher. That's what I like to do with them. But I've got a league where I've got Varsho, I've got Melendez, and I've got Davis, who we talked about last week from Pittsburgh, all on the same roster. And so I'm not short of catchers. And at the same time, they can all play outfield too. And it's beat me up a little bit here and there, but I'm holding out hope it all works out in the end. Let me go Milwaukee Brewer for you. It's a guy we've talked about, but I haven't mentioned as an ad yet, and it's Sal Frelick. He's 17.1% owned, the outfielder. He's starting every day in right field. He is making some phenomenal defensive plays, which doesn't help your fantasy, but that's okay. He's only got the 1 home run. He's got 4 RBIs, but listen, he's batting middle of the order. He's been batting 4th in almost every game here recently. If he gets bumped down, it will not be below 6 in the order. Sal Frelick's a guy that's going to play seriously 90% of the time, and he's producing. He's getting on base. His batting average, I didn't write it down, but his batting average is fine. And Sal Frelick's a guy that, again, if you're in a league where you got outfielders hurt, outfielders not producing, if you had Ward, who got smacked in the face against Toronto and fractured his face this week, we're going to need an outfielder to replace him. Sal Frelick's a guy worth looking at, depending on how big your league is and what else is available out there.
All right. So when you mentioned Milwaukee, I thought, he's going to do it to me again. But you did not. I thought you were going to go with Carlos Santana, first baseman and DH. And he homered today.
Yeah.
And a couple days, actually, on my brother's birthday, he hit 2 home runs and drove in 4. And so out of the last 5 games, he has 17, 2, 5, 1, and 6 fantasy points. I was not on his on board with him earlier in the year. Wasn't feeling him.
Yeah.
But now he's on your Brewers, and he can definitely solidify. When we're talking about hitting, he can do that. If he can do that and provide that hitting that they need, that would be something that would really help the Brewers out a lot. And so,
and what's interesting with Santana, now I saw a Milwaukee Brewer writer that said, "Oh, he'll only DH," and I immediately said, "No, he's going to play a whole lot of first base," which doesn't matter for fantasy. He's eligible for first base. But today, was it today or yesterday? It may have been yesterday. One of the days, today or yesterday. I think it was today. The infield came in to talk to the pitcher right when he was getting ready to pitch against Acuna. And you know who was doing all the talking? It was Carlos Santana. He'd been there 2 days, and he's already leading guys. He's already stepping up. And Milwaukee is a place that loves guys that are good in the dugout, guys that can lead. And Carlos Santana, we know he has the experience. We know he has the past, the history, all that kind of stuff. The question is he too old? And this season, he's proven he's not there yet. And I like the ad. I think what I said about him, I talked about him in the first segment. I don't think his fantasy value goes drastically up from where it was, but I do think it takes a bump up a little bit being in Milwaukee. It works out well for left-handed.
19% rostered right now. And first base,
it's hilarious. I think
he's first baseman.
Yeah, so, I think he's owned in every league I'm in.
Yeah, when I saw this and I saw 19%, I was really surprised.
Yeah.
And if that's the case in your league, and you need a first baseman, and a DH, and that's one thing because we got DH in our league.
Yeah.
And it's hard to find a guy who qualifies as a DH, even though you could put any player in there. But he actually, for ESPN purposes, he has to be just like anything else. He has to play 10 games at DH to qualify.
Yeah. And
so he gets that done for you, and he could put, somebody you could put it as your DH if you need to do that, and you're covered.
Agreed. I'm going to go with a pitcher for my last edition, Kevin. And this one surprised me that I'm willing to talk about this guy. But he's from the Cubs. He's 14% owned. Jameson Taillon. He's not a guy coming into the season that I was excited about at all. But 3 of his last 4 starts have been really good. Against the Mets, he went 8 innings, 0 earned runs, 4 strikeouts. Against the Cardinals, he went 5.2 innings, 1 earned run, and 6 strikeouts. And then another game against St. Louis, 6 innings, 1 earned run, 4 strikeouts. He had one little blip in between those games, but he's actually been really solid fantasy value here recently. And he's a guy, again, if he's going to be pitching like that, he's worth having on your roster. So Jameson Taillon available let's see, that would be 86% of leagues. So go get him. He'll be valuable for you.
Yeah, he's a guy who he had to do a 180 on him because we wanted nothing to do with him. And that wasn't that long ago either.
True.
And so give him credit. He has turned his season around. So and the Cubs are right in it.
Right, they are.
We would have not have thought that was going to be true, that they'd be selling off all their parts and everything else. But after winning 5 in a row, they're right there.
For the record, I said either on this one, it may have been on my Wednesday show, that I think they finished second in the Central this year. I think they overlapped Cincinnati and finished second. And I said that about a month ago. So I'm on the Cubs to the extent that I think they're going to finish the season well. They don't make the playoffs, I don't think, but I think they finish pretty well.
Yeah, whoever wins that division makes the playoffs. No one else will.
Agreed. You got anybody else to add, or are we moving to drops?
Oh, we could move to drops.
All right, let's do that. Who do we need to get rid of this week? Go ahead. I'll let you start.
Okay, so as I mentioned earlier, if you happen to have any combination of John Gray, Heaney, Dunning, or Perez, any of those 4 guys, you need to flush. Especially if you let me just say this: Dane Dunning, this guy was just simply outstanding. He came in out of the out of bullpen. He joined the rotation, was doing really well, but in the last 4 games, he's only had 1 decent start. In the other ones, he's given up 4, 5, and 3 runs. He had a negative 11 fantasy points against the Dodgers, which you go ahead and say, okay, the Dodgers, that's fine. But at San Diego, 5 innings, he walked 3, gave up 3 runs and 5 hits. And he is going to lose, out of all these 4 guys I just mentioned, he's going to lose his rotation place and go back to the bullpen. So his fantasy value was completely shot to me.
Yeah. Someone's gonna benefit from the moves they made. I don't know which one it's going to be, but one of those guys is going to benefit, I think, from it. And I would have to wait and see kind of what the rotation looks like. Do they decide that they're going to, shake things up? Are they going to go with more guys, less guys? That's kind of the question that I have right now. They do not have who they're going to pitch over the next several games because of the trades they just made. But I think one of those guys is gonna actually become more valuable. The problem is I don't have a clue which one it is. So,
right. And since Dunning was pitching out of the bullpen earlier, he is my guy.
Yeah.
He's going to lose, like I said, rotation slot, Dunning, cancel Christmas because he's lost that now.
Yeah, I would guess Dunning and Heaney are the 2 guys that are the odd men out, and Perez is the one that finds some benefit possibly.
Well, he got bombed with 4 runs in 1 inning against the Padres yesterday.
Yeah, but I think there's going to be some pressure relieved. I think Scherzer's going to help. I think there's going to be some things go on that help there as well. I mean, you talk about Scherzer and just the veteran presence that he is in a bullpen and how he's going to help out around. I think that could be a positive thing for some guys. But I think that Dunning is the guy he's the younger, so they have more time with him, so they can put him back into the bullpen and work back up with him. And Perez and Haney aren't old, but I think that those guys have maybe a little bit more opportunity right now. I think one of those guys benefits. But either way, I'm okay with getting rid of all of them now and waiting to see.
Yeah, if you have any kind of pitching option whatsoever, get them.
Yeah.
And I say that, as a Rangers ballpark is just up the highway from here.
Yeah.
It's still I had John Gray. I don't anymore. I had Dane Dunning. Don't anymore. So if I'm dropping him, that would probably be good advice for you to do the same.
I'm going to go with the pitcher as well, Tyler Wells from Baltimore. His last 3 have been -6, 8 points, and -10 points. He's not pitched more than 4.1 innings in those 3 games. Actually, 2 of those games he pitched less than 3 innings in as well. Those are stats that are going to kill you coming down this final stretch to the playoffs in fantasy baseball. Tyler Wells is no longer available for your roster. Get rid of him. Move on to somebody else. There are options out there way better than Tyler Wells at the moment.
I agree with that. And one of the guys I could have thrown in my ads, because this leads into my drops, is Elias Diaz, the catcher for Colorado.
Okay.
Because they're at home. So you want to add Colorado hitters when they're at home and jettison when they're on the road. So if he's available, go ahead and get him. Because if you happen to own Tyler Stevenson, whom I've drafted, all right,
yeah.
But that ship sailed a long time ago, but it really needs to sell now because look, over the last 4 games, -1, 1, 1, -1. So his fantasy value has sailed. And if there's any kind of catching opportunity, you mentioned Harris or Henry a moment ago. If you have any kind of guy like that you can add to your roster, Tyler Stevenson needs to go.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, Cal Raleigh, I didn't put him in my list, but he's been hot again. He's gotten hot and cold at different times this season.
Yeah, he cools off fast, but if he's hot, add him and ride him.
I'm going to talk about a guy that you've talked about adding in the past, but as we know, those players sometimes cool off, and you do got to let go of them. Jorge Soler in Miami. His last 7, he's bat 150. He only has 2 games that have been positive points in the last 11. He's killing your fantasy team if he's on your fantasy team. Get rid of Jorge Soler. Maybe keep an eye on him, but you don't want him on your roster right now.
Okay, I can see that. And one guy that I'm almost sad to bring him up.
Okay.
But Lane Thomas, the outfielder for Washington.
Yeah.
Okay. And we were all on him, as we should have been, because he was swinging the bat really well. But 0 for 4, 0 for 4, 1 for 5, and -2 fantasy points, -3 fantasy points, 1 fantasy point, -1 fantasy point.
Mm-hmm.
And if you have an outfielder, there should be, unless you're in a 20-man league or something, there's got to be an outfielder that, because he's at 66% rostered.
Yeah.
And someone that's 66% rostered better give you better numbers than -2, -2, 1, -1. So right now, go ahead, drop him, pick up someone that's swinging the bat better, keep your eyes on him, and when he heats up again, you can go ahead and pick him back up. But right now, Lane Thomas needs to be off your roster.
My only rebuttal is this. I would wait until Wednesday. If he gets moved, I want him on my team. If he doesn't get moved, then I'm done with him. But if he gets moved, depending on where he goes, but I've seen his name pop up to some really good teams. You put him in a completely different lineup. You protect him a little bit in a lineup. I want him. So I'm going to hold on to him until Wednesday. If he doesn't get moved, he's gone. If he does get moved, in most cases, I'm going to give him another week and see what happens.
Okay, so if you follow that advice, just put him on your bench.
Sure.
For the time being.
Yeah.
Because he's not producing, and he's got your Milwaukee Brewers next up.
Oh yeah, he's due for 7 home runs and
Well, hopefully not for your team, but so I don't like that matchup for him.
Sure.
So if like you said, if you want to wait around to see if he gets traded to somebody else, go ahead and do that. But please don't have him in your lineup.
My last guy, he's probably not owned by anyone listening to our show except for one person. And so this advice is for the one person who's watching.
Okay.
We have more than one person watching, but I know this person listens. Patrick Bailey's a catcher for the San Francisco Giants, is rostered in our league, Kevin. Over the last 2 weeks, he's only had 2 games where he had positive points. He's a catcher. He's only owned in like 2% of leagues. I don't know why this person has him on his roster. This person has had a good fantasy season, but he went on a little bit of a losing streak there, a 4-game losing streak, and he still had Patrick Bailey on his roster. And I started to think maybe that's part of the reason for the 4-game losing
certainly
streak.
Not help your scenario at all.
Yes. Now he's going to win this week, and he still has him on his roster. But if you're listening, secret listener, Patrick Bailey should not be on your roster. It's time to move on. Go get Cal Raleigh. Go get one of these other guys that we've talked about. You need a catcher that's not named Patrick Bailey. Move on. Cut the ties. I know he's on your favorite team, but it's time to move on from Patrick Bailey.
I certainly agree with that, especially because the Giants are on the move.
Yeah.
And somebody that's not producing, there's your trade that they might make to replace that guy. So yeah, so please.
Yeah, maybe they might make a call
secret listener,
your Carantini or somebody like that.
As soon as we come off the show here in a few minutes, go on your roster, drop them,
and you can tell us
and find another catcher.
You can tell us thank you later. That's perfectly fine.
Yeah, you can thank us later. And in our league, let's see. Let me switch over right here. I could tell you right now, players, catchers in our league. You've got Wilson Contreras. You got Ruiz, Kirk, Alvarez, Grandal, Gomes.
Listen, in our league right now, just in the last week, Yanier Diaz from Houston, Yan Gomes in Chicago, Andrew Neisner from St. Louis, Gary Sanchez in San Diego, Tom Murphy in Seattle, Riley Adams in Washington, Alejandro Kirk, Toronto, Danny Jansen in Toronto, Bo Naylor in Cleveland. All these guys are better options than Patrick Bailey. And there's 2 of them and they're a better option than Patrick Bailey.
Yeah, so secret listener, there you have it. There's your prescription to win next week.
All right. In our league right now, we're getting closer. I think we got 5 weeks left until the playoffs starting tomorrow. 5 weeks left. Let's see here. Kevin Wilson, another victory. He's on a 5-game win streak. He beat Belly Up co-founder Mike Brown this week with a high score of 395. Solid week for him there. He goes to 14-2. My dad finally back on the win after a 4-game losing streak. He's now at 12-4, beating Drew Childs, who's on a 5-game losing streak. Let's see here. Dan D'Amico strikes back this week, defending champ. He scored 405 points. That's a high for this week in our league, beating Cincinnati Sell the Team Bob, Brennan Myers this week. Let's see here. Chase Thornton, your co-host on the fantasy football show that you co-host in the Sunday mornings. He beats Nick Macaronis to go to 9-7. And then I scored a measly 231 points this week. Still get the win. I'm on a 5-game win streak. I'm now to 10-6, a game back from my dad. And 2 games back from dad. But right now our playoff race is looking pretty wild. And I think Kevin and Dad are pretty well set. I feel pretty comfortable with my spot as well. Mike Brown and Chase Thornton battling it out for that 4th playoff spot with Dan D'Amico trailing just by a game there as well. So, or let's see here. I guess he's tied with Mike after this week. So, playoff chases are coming, man.
Playoff chase is happening just like in real baseball. So,
yeah, you got to pay attention to when your league ends.
This league is hopping. So, we've got reasons for you to tune in. Of course, we got multiple reasons for that.
Well,
but
yes,
I need to just mention real quick
Okay.
that there's this other league that I am in, and in that league, this guy was like your dad. He was undefeated until today,
Okay.
and I took him down.
Took him down.
So no longer undefeated. So he's got reason to be fearful come playoff time.
Next week, starting tomorrow, Kevin Wilson, Vince Stover, one-on-one, Belly Up Fantasy Baseball League. So next week we got bragging rights.
That's right, bragging rights, and there's bragging rights. There'll be bragging going on. You can best believe that.
Yeah, I've got you and I've got Dad the following week. I've got a tough schedule here, closing out the year. So we'll see how it all shakes down. But there is that. Kevin, I talked about your article, your Dodgers article earlier in the program. Any other stuff you want to push, present, promote before we close off here?
Oh, that's pretty much it for now. And this week, they're probably, because I'll be away from my computer. That's why I was working this past weekend. I will be certainly available for the show next week. But if there's any trades that are big, you might want to go ahead and put some words on that if you want. But yeah, so definitely get over there to the BellyUpFantasySports.com website, because I talk about my Dodgers in that article. They didn't wait for the deadline. They made some moves. One pitcher of note, one that I pretty much just said, hey, well, I'm not even talking about him. And then some other Ahmad Rosario we could have talked about here. And so there are and Hernandez that they made a move on also. So that article is available. It's hot. I just dropped it a couple hours ago. So definitely want to get over there and check that out. And you can always get a hold of me on Twitter, Kevin62, WILSEA. Make any comments. I always appreciate comments as long as they're constructive. And most of them are. So I appreciate everyone that listens and checks me out.
Definitely. And I did not put out a power ranking article this week. I'm going to wait and I hope to post one Wednesday morning, post trade deadline. Figured I would just wait till after the trade deadline was done there, but you can find that on bellyupsports.com as well. Follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Sports Stove. Catch any of our past episodes on the Sports Stove podcast tomorrow night. Nope, not tomorrow night. Wednesday night, I'll be live at 8 o'clock with Dad. We'll be talking Big Ten football, previewing the Big Ten football conference, as well as talking all the baseball trade news as well. And then Thursday night, another Sports Stove local hour. We'll be talking defensive line with the EKU defensive line coach and 2 defensive linemen as well. So lots of fun stuff going on there.
Well, there's stuff going on, so definitely check it out.
Go to righteousfelon.com. Use promo code BELLYUP for 15% off your purchase. Make sure you go add and drop all the guys we convinced you of today.
That's right. Because obviously we know what we're talking about.
That's right. Thanks for tuning in to today's edition of the Sports Stove Fantasy Baseball Show. Until next time, we'll see you around the Sports Stove.
Everybody have